begin our session titled Murder They Wrote. Please switch off your mobile phones or put them on silence mode. There will be a question and answer session at the end of the discussion. We would appreciate if complete silence is observed while the session is in progress. Our moderator for this session is Sabeen Javeri. Sabeen Javeri is an award-winning short story writer and author of the upcoming novel Nobody Killed Her. Her work explores issues of gender, identity, and displacement. Over to you, Sabeen.
Thank you very much, Anika. Thank you, everyone, for coming to this session, Murder They Wrote. We have here with us some of the best crime writers of this region. I'd like to start by introducing them. Next to me is Umar Shahid. Umar Shahid Hamid. It's a very long name. Umar has written 3 books, the third of which is being launched at the KLF this year. His book, The Prisoner, was a bestseller. The Spinner's Tale recently won 2 very prestigious awards at the KLF. Now his third, The Party Worker, is already gaining critical acclaim. All 3 look at different aspects of the nexus of crime, terrorism, and politics in Karachi. He also works as a senior police officer in the counter-terrorism department and has recently returned to Pakistan after having been on a sabbatical for the past 5 years in London, where he was working as a political risk consultant. How do you find the time to write in all this? Well, we'll come to that. Next to Umar is SS Mosouf. Please, first of all, reveal to us what SS stands for.
No, it's supposed not to be revealed, but Saqib. My name is Saqib. Thanks for putting me on the spot.
Yeah, well, you know, I'm a crime writer too, so I have to solve mysteries. SS Mosouf is a Karachi-born writer-filmmaker. His narrative feature, Kala Pul, The Black Bridge, a thriller short, was shortlisted at the Asian Festival of First Films. His shorts have been shown at festivals from San Francisco to Goa, including his Indus Valley documentary, In Search of Meluha, which also has over 125,000 views on YouTube. That's amazing. The Warehouse is his first novel and is inspired by relief work in the region. It has been published to great acclaim. SS is based in San Francisco. So welcome to Karachi, SS. And next to SS is Piyush Jha, who we know is a fantastic...
Namaskar.
who is here from India, our esteemed guest. Piyush is a novelist and a filmmaker. He wrote his first novel, Mumbaistan, in 2012. And in fact, it was so successful that his publishers decided to start an entire series. Since then, he has written 2 more books under that series, Compass Box Killer and Antisocial Network. I like that title. Both the books were bestsellers, and now he's on his next. He has also written a standalone crime novel called Rakshas, India's #1 serial killer, which too has been well received and has gained popularity. Piyush is based in Mumbai. Piyush is also the producer and director of The King of Bollywood. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
All right.
Starring Om Puri.
Yes, yes, the late Om Puri. Yes. So, welcome to this session.
Thank you.
I would like to begin by asking you, how do you feel about being called genre writers? Sorry? Okay. Even if it is a prestigious genre, do you feel it is limiting to be called a genre writer, or do you think it's liberating?
Should I start? You were looking at me, so should I start?
Well,
okay,
I'll
start. I'm a guest here, so I'll start. Okay. I'd like to first thank you very much. It's my first time in Karachi, and I really loved it. So thank you very much for your... thank you. A second time in Pakistan, so you know that I love Pakistan. All right.
And you're wearing green.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. And I wear the tag of a genre writer as a badge of honor on my sleeve. I love it that people call me a crime fiction writer. I would not have it any other way. because I write crime fiction, and if it was confused for anything else, I would be not a success. Okay, so I love the fact that I'm a crime fiction writer, and I go to bed sleeping and thinking and very happy.
Yeah,
But
but
I'm
you
a
don't
crime
have to
fiction.
describe curtains. Right, okay. SS, I know that you mentioned earlier that you don't particularly like being boxed in a genre, but if you had to, you would rather call your novel a war novel rather than a crime novel. So could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I guess my thing was that I like noir, so the style is noir, and it's inspired by the war in our region. You know, everything west of Indus has been a war zone practically. So, yeah, I mean, to me, it was the great Pakistani war novel from a Pakistani guy's perspective, even though it was not our war. But as far as genres are concerned, I mean, it's what it's classification. You have to classify things. If you the powers that be of publishing classify me any way they can, as long as it sells. So it's their classification. That's fine with me.
Umar, how do you feel about it?
You know, I maybe it's because I'm still very new at this. I've never quite figured out why the publishing industry has these classification of someone being a genre writer or someone being a literary writer, because it seems to me that it needlessly puts people in boxes. Someone can be a very good writer and write about crime fiction. I think what it really should be is about telling stories. I think all of us will agree that we got into this because we wanted to tell stories. No one sort of started out saying, yeah, I'm going to sort of define myself as a literary writer or a crime fiction writer.
Yeah, in fact, it's basically these tags have been created by the publishing industry because they wanted to kind of find the slots in the bookshops. Where this book will go. So they don't want to get confused. So all the staff has to know that this book goes crime fiction. So it's for that reason, really.
As long as the books go in the slots which says bestsellers.
Exactly.
Yes, that's the big one.
Keep the money rolling in it.
So in the end, it's all about success. Okay, before we move on, I've had a request. Could the young people please offer seating to the ones less able to stand? We'd really appreciate it if you could sit on the floor and offer seating to those less able to stand. Thank you very much for that. Right. So now that we've talked a little bit about crime fiction, I would like to know why you chose to write about crime. Why did this particular method of writing appeal to you, and why write at all? Why did you choose writing as a medium? Umar, you've had a very exciting life, so let's start with you.
I I choose to write crime fiction primarily because of my profession. I'm sorry. I am very sorry. Usually people have no problem hearing me, but this is a first.
They'll all pass.
Not the police station, that's why.
Is that better? I started writing crime fiction because of being a police officer, and I found that the stories that were there within the police were tremendous stories. They were sort of stories that I, as a reader, would have loved to have read. It's just that it was a world that was not accessible to a reading public, primarily because most writers weren't from that world, and so it would be very difficult for them to get access to those stories, and most police officers would have no interest in writing, or at least writing fiction. So for me it was a very nice niche area which I was able to slot into.
Yeah, I'd like to know a little bit more about that. Okay, maybe I'm stereotyping, but it's hard to imagine a police officer who writes.
I think only in Pakistan, maybe. It's happening everywhere else. Yeah.
What do you say, Piyush?
Well, there are few police officers who write in Mumbai, in India. There are quite a few now, and some of them are quite well received and well read.
Okay.
And again, they come from the same background. well, the reason why they write is because they have so many stories to tell. At some point in time, they
It's
kind of,
about
yeah.
having a story to tell.
But-
Which actually brings me that you were originally a film director.
I'm not originally, I am a film director.
Right.
I'm here in my capacity as an author, but I'm also a film director.
Well, okay. But what I wanted to find out was that this transition towards being a novelist.
Well, so it's, I was kind of writing a script with a big star in it, and the star had to go away to shoot a film in London for 3 months. So I was, this is a big Bollywood star. So I thought that I'll wait until he comes back. And I didn't have anything to do during that 3-month period. So I started writing. So I wrote a short story, which my wife, who's here too, she said, okay, well, it's pretty good. So why don't you write another one? So I wrote another one, and then I wrote another one. And then we said, okay, hey,
No
this
stopping you.
seems okay, and let's send it out to publishers. So we sent it out to, we don't know anyone from the publishing industry. We are from the film industry. So we just sent it out to some friends. They said, okay, I know this person. So we sent it out, and we sent it out to 3 publishers. And 2 weeks later, I got offers from those publishers saying, we want to buy your book, we want to take the book. And in fact, one publisher said, okay, no, not 1 book, 3 books. So I signed on the dotted line, and then I realized, shit, what have I done? I have to write now, because I've signed a contract and taken money. So that kind of put my film career on the back burner, because, now I had to deliver those books. So that's why, and then I got involved and I started liking it, and I've now written 4 books and I have a 5th one coming. But this time I've been smart. I told my publisher, this book is going to come out with my film. So it's tied in with the film, So it's the film about the book and book about the film. So, soon to be a mission. So, yeah, so.
I have to add that the theme of wives intervening in careers seems to be a common one, certainly with Piyush and me, because I think I really started writing. There was a few years back when I was reading a book and I kept complaining about how the writer was absolutely crap and he didn't know what to do. And my wife said, just shut up and write a book if you
Do it
think you're
yourself.
good.
But
all heard that.
but Stephen King says that, he's asked, like Stephen
Did
King.
his wife also say the same
No,
thing?
yeah, no, I guess so. But what he says is that people ask him, how do you become a writer? So he says, you read and 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 you read, and one day you put down the book and say, this is crap, I can write better than this. That's the day you become a writer.
SS, what about you? You also made the transition from filmmaker
Yeah,
to...
I think for me it was मेरी पहली जो film थी उसको मैंने उर्दू नवार का तो I wanted to tell stories और अपनी ज़बान में उर्दू में film की स्टेज से और फिल्म से जाहिर बात है अपनी ज़बान में कर सकते हैं तो that was something I wanted to do. But when I started writing, वो उर्दू में I didn't have the talent, quite frankly, and I didn't have the craft in Urdu. So you have to do it in English. So that was one thing. But the stories are ये stories तो वही है ना जो हमने सुनी हुई हैं. My book is just a pathway to tell the stories of our people. So it's that inspiration is you go somewhere, you see the people, you see the evil defined by the West and our society as well, and you see the people's history version. So उसको आप किस तरह लाएंगे सामने? So many times it's inside us के इस तरह Umar's book, the first book, you can just feel that it's ready to come out of him. It just pours out.
Okay. Well, we all talk about, having stories to tell and something to say, which actually brings me to my next question, which is, I think, as crime writers or thriller writers, I think we can all relate to the phrase, truth is stranger than fiction, rather than fiction being stranger than truth. And also, I read in one of your interviews, Omar, where you said that creativity is born out of crisis. So I would like to know a bit more about that. How much do you turn towards truth? How much is fiction? And how do you sort of come to this amalgamation of both?
Yeah, absolutely. What the quote I said about sort of creativity being forged out of sort of difficult circumstances, I think if you were to hold that up historically, you'll find that a lot of very creative writing comes in eras or periods of history where you have things going upside down, or periods of revolt or revolution or insurgency. And I think that that's very much been the case in Pakistan. And also, to be more specific, I've written so far a lot on Karachi, on the city of Karachi. And the city of Karachi, the sort of tumult that it has gone through in the last 30 odd years, again, I think makes it a ripe subject for fiction. Because you will find the most unbelievable stories, whether they're to do with the police or whether they're to do with crime or even other than that, because of the sort of the chaos that has been there in the city for the past 30 years. You will find absolutely amazing stories in every street corner.
So what about now that things are settling down in Karachi? Is it bad for business?
Things never quite settle down in Karachi. There'll still be plenty of stories.
Right, okay. Coming to you, Piyush, Mumbai is, a mega city.
Yeah.
So do you also find your inspiration in the
Yeah, I mean,
underworld? Do you
Mumbai.
hang out?
My first book is called Mumbai Stan.
Yeah.
So I couldn't be, Well, actually, I love my city. So this is actually an ode to Mumbai. And it has changed in the past 15, 20 years or so. And I wanted to write a book about the Mumbai I grew up in, and what kind of changed the fabric of the city. And so I wanted to write it in the kind of write the kind of stories that I like to read, and I like to read crime fiction. So I weaved in my love for my city and the love for crime fiction, and Mumbai Stan was born. And then I continued. So I write, all my books are based in Mumbai, and because they become a very important part. Mumbai becomes a very important part of my book. In fact, it is a character in itself, and the pace of my book is also sort of defined by the pace of my city. It's like, it's very fast paced. So my books are also very fast paced. So it's like I say, Mumbai there's a twist in every turn, and that's what I try to reflect in my book. Yeah.
They're real page turners, your
Yeah.
stories.
Thank you.
SS, what about you? I mean, you're based in San Francisco, so how does that work?
I think first thing is the thing is, one thing in my book, Sonia Gonzalez is a character who says, conspiracy theories come true in Pakistan. As a end of the first chapter, when she offers this case to this guy who's the insurance guy, and it's true. When I was doing relief work in Kashmir, people were saying these Americans are giving us these are not real shots. This polio thing, and we found out about the Osama thing, and you're there on the ground. You're telling them no, they're trying to save your lives. And then guess what happened? There was a conspiracy theory that came true. So in Pakistan, these things happen. These conspiracy theories, it's
You
like,
have a very fertile imagination.
it's weird. People come up with these things, and it happens true in Pakistan. So people are saying things like Osama is still alive. You're like, no, he's not. But then something will happen, and you're like, oh shit, man, why does it have to be true? But it's like Pakistan is like all these weird things happen here.
There was this great flood in New York after they threw Osama in the sea. And in Pakistan, people said, you got what you asked for.
Oh yeah, there's always some connection. The earthquake in Kashmir happened because two guys got married in Peshawar. There's always something like that, right? Seriously, I mean, that's what you hear. So it's fun to write about that and make it fiction, of course.
Okay. We talked about Stephen King.
Right.
Another thing that he said was, when people come and talk to him about his books, they ask him about plot. They ask him about the plot setting, the plot pace, but they never ask him about the language. So as writers, how important is language for you? Who would like to go first?
It's I don't have a lot of training in terms of creative writing. So for me, it was essentially that whatever I was writing should be very accessible. Also, perhaps I wasn't competent enough to write, and to structure it in very sort of in an overly advanced way. but that came naturally to me, and it seemed to work as well, because in terms of the flow of a story, I feel that the simpler the language that I've kept in my books, the story seems to flow, and the narrative seems to flow. So for me, I haven't really thought too much about it. It's what works.
And SS, what about you? I mean, did you have any training for it, or?
I mean, I'm not trained, but you have to develop the craft, but my inspiration was noir. So it's like, whether you look at Hammett or Hemingway, it's very clean, crisp sentences, not a lot of adjectives. So that was my inspiration, and maybe I'm not competent enough. I mean, he's very competent, by the way, but I'm just saying all of us maybe get bored by it. I mean, David Foster Wallace can write about a doorknob turning for 40 pages, right? And
Yeah.
he's a genius. I don't have the patience for that.
Yeah.
You want to
Piyush,
open the door and have a gun go.
Exactly.
Piyush,
Yeah.
you said in one of your interviews that I can't be bothered to be describing curtains when someone is getting stabbed.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about
Well,
that.
most of the time when I used to read a book, I would read a book and then I would hit a boring part where people would be describing the vistas and things, and then suddenly go off, or then I would skip, let me get to the bit good part. So I decided when I write, I'll just write the good parts. I'll cut out all the boring parts, because I also felt that ultimately it's I am a reader and I would like to read my own books. So and I would like to keep it really simple, so that it would be like accessible to everybody, and mostly because I feel that crime fiction doesn't really lend itself to turn of phrase, because you are interested more in what's going to happen next, what's this character, how this character is going to react, what's going on in this plot at this point of time, rather than try to describe a doorknob. And also my training in that sense is from screenwriting, where we have to be very economical with our words when you write a screenplay, because and you have to describe action very well, because in screenwriting, when you're describing something, you can't say he thought like this, because on screen you can't show man's thoughts. So you can't put a camera in his head and say, okay, this is going on. So you have to describe his thoughts by his actions. So you have the audience has to learn what's going on in his head by how he is reacting to things, or the action that he's taking. And so you have to work very hard at describing that, and you have to describe it in the fewest number of words, because the shot is only that long. A screenplay is only about 110 pages, and each page is supposed to be a minute of screen time. So you can't describe, so this is a minute, and so every shot, this is like 3 seconds, so I have to describe it in 3 seconds. That's what it's going to take. So when you learn to write that way, you automatically become, economical and cut out all the boring parts and get to the meat.
I think Piyush's point about wanting to read what you write is a very good one, because it's also something that I use. The sort of test that I would always put to anything that I wrote is this something that I would like to read as a reader? And because I consider myself someone with sort of average taste, in the sense that not overly sophisticated. So I probably read what most people read, and if my writing cannot pass that test, if it is too highbrow, then it means that I'm sort of either overshooting, or I'm not really connecting with the sort of audience that I want to connect with. And I think that'll probably be the same for all of us.
Yeah, exactly.
So, what about then this little rivalry sort of thing between literary writers and genre writers, where the literary writers look down upon the genre writers, and the genre writers are very dismissive of the literary writers? Can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay.
I
was
still haven't
asking-
figured out what literary writing is.
I think एक बड़ा मजे की बात होती है, आप किताब लिखते हैं तो कोई क्रिटिक आए कि यार ये किताब फिल्म के लिए बहुत अच्छी है. Meaning they're saying you're a genre writer, it's very clean, it can be converted to a film very quickly. आई डोंट थिंक डेविड फॉस्टर वॉलेस की किताबें हैं, बहुत से लोगों की किताबें हैं. अब ऐसे नहीं होता कि स्क्रिप्ट बना लें. 500 पेज की किताब को स्क्रिप्ट बनाना, it's a lot of work. So I don't know if it's a rivalry. There is a very intentional thing that people like us write the way we write.
I think in both our countries, or I think perhaps more in India. I don't know about Pakistan, but I'll say that there are a whole bunch of writers who say, "I want to be a writer. Why? Because I want to win the Booker Prize."
Yeah, that's the mark of the
they
literary
start
writer.
from that point. कि अच्छा तो ये Booker Prize में ना ऐसे लिखना चाहिए.
The formula for the Booker Prize.
The formula.
So then they start on that. They start describing Belgadi and Frangipani and all that stuff. So all that stuff. So that becomes pretentious, and so that becomes categorized as literary fiction, and then some of them actually win awards, and that's very good.
Yeah.
And
Obviously, they were
then they
literary
start looking down upon say अच्छा क्या हुआ and all. अच्छा कौन है? Oh, Mubaistan. Oh, okay. Then I ask him, how many books did you all sell? You're thinking, no, I had a print run of 3,000. I said, okay, fine. Oh, how much did you use? 30,000 first. So then then there's no, that's the end.
That's
So I
a
was like,
surprise one.
पैसे दिखाओ यार, show me the money.
But I'll rather win one. I will take the
I
Booker.
knew you would say that.
I would. Please.
नहीं फिर तो ये मत लिख यार तू. बुकर का चाहिए तो कुछ और लिख.
Then you need a few different descriptions of Frangipani.
पानी आप
जो है
5 जगह handicraft दिखाएं, एक सुई दूसरी निकल.
Although I must say that the last Booker Prize winner
Yeah.
was he wrote a crime
Exactly.
fiction novel. So
Yes, exactly.
वो हमारी बिरादरी का था.
Who are we talking about?
The
a brief
Jamaican
history,
guy.
a brief history of
He's
Seb.
writing for a while
Yeah.
too.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
So there's hope for us, right?
Inshallah.
All right. Okay, so tell me about your characters. You guys have written books where mostly the characters are men. The protagonists are male and the plot revolves around them. Have you considered creating strong female characters? Why are they always
So
second
I'll
fiddle?
say this. They're gonna. First of all, I don't think they always tell you write about what you know.
So you don't know women.
First of all, just to be
Where
very
are the
frank,
wives?
I'm not writing a story about a cop in San Francisco who's a white guy also, right? Just to be clear, you write about what you know, about the country you're with. I mean, when I was learning writing, I'm writing, and you do have female characters, but it's we might not do service to that gender also. Why don't you guys think of that? We don't know all the intricacies of those things, right? So it sounds kind of flat.
Such a thing as research?
Well, yes, you can, but I would say that on your first novel, you do it as a female protagonist. It's like shooting yourself in the head because it'll not be right. I don't think it'll be right as a
I'll
first
let
novel,
you go
right?
since it's your debut.
Yeah.
But what about Piyush and Umar?
Yeah, I think the 3 novels I've written, I would have certainly liked to have written sort of more characters, female characters that were key to the plot. The problem is that the world that I am writing about, whether it is the police, like in The Prisoner, whether it's the world of sort of jihadis in The Spinner's Tale, or the world of sort of political party activists in The Party Worker, are unfortunately very, very male-dominated sort of areas or professions, at least to this point, and they are also sort of professions that are essentially pretty chauvinistic. So it didn't make a lot of sense. My sort of take on it was that were I to bring in a key female protagonist, it wouldn't hold true to the sort of image that I was trying to create, which is a very real, very gritty image. So it didn't. Because of that, incidentally, none of these books have that. But I certainly agree that for me, I find that for myself, for me to grow as a writer, the challenge for me is now to write strong female characters, and it's one of the things, for instance, that I'm hoping to do in my next book. Which I was talking at a panel yesterday, which is about match fixing, but I've kind of chosen to place the setting as the women's cricket team rather than the men's. I thought that
that's
would
very
be interesting.
Interesting.
Very good.
Ah,
Right?
right.
Already intrigued.
So I have very strong female characters in my books. In fact, but you know, the principal character of my book is an inspector called Inspector Virkar of the Mumbai Crime Branch, and he, you know, he has and there is always a woman, and you know, so if I say more, I might reveal you know, some parts of it. Don't want to say, but they are strong female characters, and then. In my the latest book, I have a female character who is the lead, in that sense, because it's Rakshas, you know, it's India's #1 serial killer, and the serial killer is male, and the cop is a female, the one who goes after him. And my next book is a book which the one which is tied into the film is an entirely female-oriented film. So I mean, a book, a female-oriented book and film that is. The protagonist is entirely female, and I think I managed to get it okay, because you know, I write my characters, and then I get my wife to read it, and if she disagrees, I have a fight with her, and then I change it the next morning. You know, so
That's a good technique. So that actually brings me to criticism. As writers, how do you handle A, criticism, B, not just criticism, but when people try to read too much into your stories, when people...
Has that happened to you?
I knew that was coming.
yeah. She's getting around to that, right? Right.
So tell me about that.
You want me to start? I just said my.
No,
you see,
and not you to start, because you're very thick-skinned.
no, I'll because I was on that point. I'll just finish, because see, I write only for one person, and that's my wife. All my books are dedicated to my wife, right? Because you got to write for one person. You can't please the world. I write it only for my wife, and if she likes it, it's fine. I don't care who says what. Yeah.
That's Piyush's beautiful wife.
Thank you. So yeah, that's because you can't. There's a whole world of criticism out there, and everybody's a critic. So you know, you'll just have everybody's opinions, and that can mess with your head. So I know that I'm writing for one person. That one person likes it. I wouldn't be damned about the rest of the world.
I think you have to obviously write for yourself. Obviously, your partner, your wife, is the one who will keep it real for you. You're overextending here. This is not real. This character will never do this, because you know because it takes a long time. You do wanna they go through the process with you. You know, my wife will say, you know, nobody would do this. This is just, and then you argue with them because you can argue with them, but other than that, you don't really argue with people. It is what it is.
You just take it in your stride.
You take it, and you're not sensitive enough to, because people will say, I'll just say this, that you know, when you see a film that's bad and you're like, कितना time ज़ाया कर दिया हमारा, and as a filmmaker you realize, यार 2-2.5 साल बंदे ने लगाए होंगे इस पे, हमने यूं उसको dismiss कर दिया. You know, there's a guy named Walter Mosley. उसने कहा है कि एक किताब पढ़ते पहली बार तो समझ में भी नहीं आती. You have to read it again. So I'm rereading, for example, My Name is Red again after 10 years, and I'm like, you know, किताब 2-3 बार पढ़े आपको, फिर then you get it if it's a classic. So you know, time तो लगता है.
No, I think I've come to this theory after having written for a few years, that being a writer is a bit like holding public office, in the sense that you are exposing yourself to the public. Public office holders will expose themselves to sort of gain votes. You're exposing yourself so that you have sales or to sell books. Everyone will have an opinion of what you do, of whether what you're doing is right or wrong, or a perception of what you're trying to do. Sometimes it'll be negative, sometimes it'll be positive, sometimes it'll be rightly sort of negative, and sometimes it'll be a total misperception. But you nonetheless have to do what you do, right? You have a certain sort of agenda, you have a certain policy framework, if you want to use sort of public or official terminology, and you follow that. And if it comes off, it comes off, and if it doesn't, it doesn't.
That's a good approach to have. I just have a couple of more questions, and then we can open it up to the audience and see what is it that they want to ask you. One more question I'm interested in is, can you hear me now? Is your writing regime. You all have, well, at least, Omar, you have a day job. Not true.
I have a day job.
Yes, you.
And
Very much so.
So when do you find the time to write? And, do you have a regular routine, or how do you go about it?
So, I have 3 kids.
Okay.
I have no time. But,
Okay.
usually I travel a lot, so on the plane, usually.
On the plane?
On the
Okay.
plane a lot.
So is it always in the back of your
Editing
mind?
is great on the plane. Writing is not. Editing
Right.
is what you do on the plane, I guess. For me.
Okay. So do you do bash out a first draft and then you edit?
Yes, I will bash out first draft in WordPad text, just whatever comes out, and then spend years editing.
At at a regular time every day, or just whenever?
No regular time. When I can find time. Yeah.
What about you, Piyush?
Oh, I have a very particular way of writing because that works for me. So I plot in my head, and I have the plot in my head. Once I have the plot figured out in my head, and it's clean, so I know that it's fine. It'll work for any reader once it's clean in my head. And then I don't I can't type, or I'm very slow at typing myself. So I have a typist. And I get in a typist, and he comes at between 3 o'clock and 6 o'clock, and he sits, and I narrate the story to him. So I don't spend too much of time. I do 1,500 words. I tell him 1,500 words, and I narrate it to him. He writes those 15 words, goes away, and he comes back the next day, 1,500 words again. I narrate.
Maybe that's why your stories have that oral storytelling quality.
Well.
When I was reading it, I really felt that. I felt as if it was someone telling a story.
Yeah.
It had that, as a South Asia has a very rich storytelling tradition,
Yeah.
oral storytelling tradition, and I think your stories have that touch.
Well, whatever. If it works.
Do you have a typist? The two of
I
you?
don't.
I wish. I wish.
I'm jealous.
We're from India, man. Cheap labor, man. That's lucky for us, right?
I have on occasion used my son.
Okay.
Child labor.
Child labor. Oh, perfect.
What about you, Umar? What's your writing?
I think it's if you, irrespective of whatever else you're doing, if you want to be a writer, you have to, as Piyush mentioned, you have to have some sort of regime. You have to be very sort of regimented about going about it. Whether you have a target that you'll write for 2 hours every day, or you have a word target, or whatever. Because if you really kind of want to, do it as a serious endeavor, I think you can't sort of say I'll do it and then I'll sort of leave it for 5 months and come back to it. I was very lucky in that last 5 years when I did the bulk of my writing. I was living in London, which meant that my job was such that it afforded me the time to sort of to do that. Having been back now for 5 months and not written a word, it's a much more challenging prospect because now my job now is something where it's not restricted by regular working hours. Anything can happen at any point in the day. So I think now for me the challenge is to reinvigorate that structure, because I think that if you don't have that structure, you won't really be able to write.
That's good to know.
What about yours?
Mine.
Yeah, we haven't asked you anything.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, at the moment, because I'm not working on anything, I don't have a writing routine. But I'm the kind of writer where, the idea just stews in your mind and it just boils and cooks. And when the dish is ready to be served, I'll just sit down and I'll write it. Having said that, I do tell my students to have a very regular
Routine.
writing routine. Yeah, exactly. No, I think if you write 3 pages every morning, which is what I did when I was working on a novel, I wrote 3 pages as soon as I got up, didn't look at my phone, didn't brush my teeth, nothing, just 3 pages right away. I think that helps. But anyway, so is there anything else you guys would like to talk about before we open it up to the floor?
We could talk about the characters in your books.
Yeah, you wish.
No.
You wish.
I think we'll open up to the floor.
Okay. All right. So, any questions? Yes.
Mike.
Green Midway.
My name is Nia Rahman, and I have two questions if there is enough time. The first one is, do you think crime writing has a social responsibility? For example, do you foresee yourself glorifying a pedophile or, something dramatic and unsavory? My second question is that reading habits are different in digital publishing, where we seem to be moving. And it's also increasingly visual. With social media, text and vision becomes a little blurred. So what do you think literary writers can learn from your genre, in addition to brevity and adding thrill?
Who is that question for? Okay. Who would like
Should I?
to?
Should I?
Yeah.
Yes, I do believe that crime writers have a social responsibility. Yes, I do believe that at the end of it all, good should triumph over evil. And that's what I endeavor to. Having said that, I would also try to say that, like in my last book, which is Rakshas, India's #1 serial killer, I have written from the serial killer's point of view. And that's also because I wanted to kind of bring out the fact that a serial killer is somebody who's mentally imbalanced or mentally ill, and the fact that in our region, I suppose I can include Pakistan in it, but I talk about India. In our country, we don't have a very good record when it comes to taking care of mental illness. We try to push away the fact that there is a mentally ill person in our, in our family or this thing. We try to, that becomes a blight on us, and we don't try to address it in the right way. And mental health is a very big issue. So I kind of also wanted to the reader to understand that there is a mental health problem out here. However, I didn't want them to empathize to that extent that they start liking the serial killer as such. So yeah, so I try to balance that, and I think I have succeeded, because a lot of people have said that they understood the person. They didn't empathize with him, but they did understand him. So that I tried to do. But I do believe that at the end of the day, the crime writer should give the right message out.
So I'll start it up. I don't think we have a social responsibility. We are not elected officials. We might be public intellectuals, but we are not elected officials. But at the same, and I also in my noir, I don't believe the world is black and white. Things don't get resolved. As Chino Achebe said, things come apart. Beautiful book. So things are not going to get resolved. However, I only would write about things where, if there's an evil person, the caricature should not be like the way Americans presented German soldiers as Nazis, right? So, अगर आप तालिबान के बारे में बात करेंगे, उसको फिर भी आपको इंसान दिखाना पड़ेगा, क्योंकि it's not, so you have to create characters जो real हों, और and there is no social responsibility कि एकदम से आपने उसको, to use your word, राक्षस जो है, it's like we have an image for that. You still have to make him into a real person. क्योंकि craft is your thing. आपने craft दिखाना है. The rest वरना लोग पढ़ेंगे नहीं, it will get flat.
Omar, would you like to add to
I
that?
think we'll go on to the next question.
Right. Well, I think the second part of the question was about brevity. Would you like to say a few things about that?
The question was what literary writers can learn from genre writers.
Describe less.
I think, yeah,
use less adjectives.
I'm sure that there's a lot that they could learn, but I think obviously they write with very different objective in mind. So I don't think it's a fair thing to say that what could they learn from crime fiction writers or vice versa. They have their own sort of style of doing things, and
My follow-up on that is that we are moving towards digital publishing for which your genre is more prepared. The consumption of thrill books or crime books will be more acceptable than, you know, David Foster Wallace. Like, so what can we do?
I
for
think,
that?
you know, to be very honest, that has always been the case, hasn't it? I mean, when Arthur Conan Doyle wrote Sherlock Holmes, I bet that his sales kicked everyone else's sales because it's a sort of function of human nature that we tend to like to read stuff that is, you know, about things that are not very pleasant. So I don't think that will change or that will be further sort of enhanced by the onset of the digital age. I mean, if you look at, forget us, but if you look at international bestsellers, the top bestsellers globally are genre fiction writers, whether it's, you know, Pierce, talk about James Patterson
James
or whoever else. They're genre writers. I mean, you know, they sell 25 million books, and the guy who wins the Man Booker sells like 10,000 books.
And not only that, crime fiction is the largest selling genre in the world. Period. It is so. हमारे इधर romance है, but world में.
There's a lady over there. Oh, Sudeep, I think, also wants to ask.
Yeah.
No, one of the things I've been hearing over the last couple of days is the insistence on creating a schism between genre writing and literary writing. Broadly speaking, this is the sense I'm getting. The irony, of course, is you mentioned Sherlock Holmes, Conan Doyle, who's a fine writer. We read Sherlock Holmes books because he's a excellent writer.
Absolutely, yeah.
He also has the qualities of fast-paced fiction. That's secondary, I think. You read C.L.R. James, he's a cricket writer. The reason a lot of people read C.L.R. James is not because they are interested in cricket, but he writes beautiful sentences. They're not boring. The thing is, even a poet like K.K. Daruwala, who's a police officer, is a poet in India, for instance, or Matthew Arnold, who was a poet, but he was one of those, he used to write this detective note fiction. I don't know whether you know that. What is important to stress is you cannot possibly escape good writing or craft. That is the key. These subdivisions are, obviously, some have more sales. It's a question of whether you want to bat in test match cricket or T20, and each one has their rewards.
That's
and
a good way to
they are
put it.
all
I
legitimate.
think the difference is somebody is playing cricket and somebody is playing baseball. We playing baseball. You know, I'll tell you what, Sherlock Holmes, you say, has Arthur Conan Doyle is a great writer. Tell me one sentence of his that you remember. You don't.
No,
you remember the
that's-
plots of Sherlock Holmes stories.
It's not about that. It's
So
not about.
I'm just trying to tell you
I
that
don't
at
think
this point of time, this genre writing rises above the turn of phrase.
Piyush, all I'm
That's the
saying,
only difference.
No. Piyush, all
Yeah.
I'm saying is this kind of fight or debate is good on the stage, but
Well, this is-
ultimately, the only thing that I don't have to remember a sentence. It's not a school debate
This
or
is a
anything.
long-
telling you,
this is a
no
long
one
fact is-
conversation.
Not
No,
you.
no, we
No
don't
one
remember.
Let's
We don't-
engage in this in the speakers lounge later on. Let's take a few more questions. There's a lady in the back. who's been
Elementary,
raising
my
her
dear
hand.
Watson.
The game's afoot, right?
Talking about social responsibility and good and bad, I'm just wondering, would it work, or would it be better if we moved to beyond the good and bad in the way that we look at, and to look at the way in which society deprives certain people to become what they become? So if we are finding a human in a terrorist, there are so many struggles that person goes through in daily life, which contribute to that person becoming what that person becomes, and maybe not having enough opportunity or that much opportunity as somebody who didn't become a terrorist. So in that way, isn't actually writing from the perspective of a criminal sometimes is a way of social responsibility?
SS, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, I mean, again, I won't say that I do criminal, but I will tell you a little story. I was traveling to Karachi in a bus with kids from Afghanistan. They were traveling in the bus to Karachi. वो कराची आ रहे थे डिफेंस कचरा उठाने, ठीक है. तो it was very inspirational for me. They were saying तुमने वहाँ पे हम अब्दुल शाह गाजी जाके बिरयानी खाते हैं. It was kind of a thing. मगर the point is they're coming to pick up the trash we drop all the way from Afghanistan. And some of them will become who knows what. So there is my social responsibility was to put them in the story in some way, right? Or create a fiction story, right? We can always hide behind fiction stuff. But these are real life events. So yes, we have a social responsibility to take those stories and remind people that these kids who are picking up these plastic polythene bags outside Sunday Bazaar are coming from a very long way because they can make money here. So that is part of the storytelling process. But I don't have a social responsibility. That kid could become anything, right?
At the end of the day, we are artists.
Yeah, we are artists.
Lady in red.
In most crime books, you indirectly point out to certain criminals in the society or even name them. Does not that put a threat on yourselves, or do you get any kind of
Omar, please answer that.
stresses in your life?
And you should answer that yours too also.
I'm not saying anything.
Or are you stepping on people's toes in real life?
I think it's what's important to remember is that it's fiction. It's a story. It may well be based in reality. And the other aspect of that is that, when you are talking about certain subjects, let's say, for instance, you're talking about political parties in Karachi, or you're writing about Karachi over the last 25 years or something like that, the aspect of political violence in the city and its ups and downs or whatever is an integral part of it. So if you are wanting to tell that story, whether you're a filmmaker or a writer, then it's not, you can't sort of fluff it up and say that, talk about the frangipani in Karachi and not talk about, people on the streets with guns. I don't think that any of us have put in real names. No, I mean it's at the end of the day, it is fiction. Because you can sort of anyone can choose to label whatever character, whether it's in Sabine's book or mine or in Pierce's. You can play that game that this one is this and this one is that, but it is fiction at the end of the day.
I mean, we all draw inspiration from real life, and sometimes we use real events as a vehicle to tell a story. But at the end of the day, what's important is to remember that it's fiction. It's a made-up novel. It's a story, and we should be able to differentiate between reality and fiction.
And I think events to डालने पड़ते हैं. मेरी किताब में book ends हैं 2011 में जिस तरह है कि चीज़ें हुई हैं. सलाला पे रेज हुआ, उसामा का रेड हुआ. तो the events obviously are kind of bookends to events happening in the middle. पर इस तरह नहीं होता कि आप किसी का नाम ले दें. That would be not the right thing to do.
It's unfair to the writers as well to put this responsibility on them and try and find something that's not there. Having said that, any more questions? Yes, you and Desera. Mike, please, Desera.
My question's for something based on what Umar said, but I'd love to get more than one perspective. You mentioned that you've probably read what everyone else has read, and you don't really go into literary fiction, you probably do, I don't know. But so for an aspiring
I've tried, but I'm not able to finish those literary books. I get to about page 55 and then
I think that's 10, true for all of us. Yeah. But for an aspiring writer who probably hasn't read all these literary things, do you think it should be like a barrier to entry to maybe he won't get like the respect he deserves, or people won't take him seriously because he has not read Arthur Conan Doyle or David Foster Wallace or something?
No, I don't think so at all. I mean, I'm often asked this thing at various events, like, who were your favorite writers? And I know that there are a lot of writers who would sort of quote really kind of literary presences or literary writers, many of whom I haven't heard of. But you have to read what interests you, and if you want to write, it's likely that you will pick up stuff, or you'll write stuff similar to the stuff that interests you. So for instance, one of the things that I've always said is, when people have asked me what writer did you really like, I said Mario Puzo. I mean, you can call him a hack writer, you can call him sort of pulp fiction writer virtually, but I thought he was a great writer.
Did it have an effect on your choice of profession, the kind of reading you did?
No, I think I would have been on the other side of the law.
That's right.
You're a good guy.
Don Omar.
Right, Zara, okay.
Have any books inspired like your style of writing or what you have written? Like any books you have read?
Who is this question for? You wanted to ask
All of
All
us.
of you.
Well, I'll tell you one book which is very inspirational to me is Frederick Fawcett's novel, Day of the Jackal. Yeah, because I'm sort of bred in that. I keep going back to it again and again. That's yeah. That's right. Yeah, and it's written in the '60s and it's still around. So it's a crime fiction book which stands the test of time. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I read everything inspiration wise, going from Robert Louis Stevenson to Mario Puzo. You read everything, whatever you can.
Omar, what about you?
Yeah, I think it's pretty diverse. I mean, I found some great inspiration in comics. A lot of sort of Batman and stuff like that. Similarly, I've often watched Bollywood films and thought, that's a good idea. So it's not really, again, similar to the point I made. I think it's a fallacy to say that as a writer you should only be inspired if you read Chekhov or something like that. You can be inspired by anything.
You wanted to ask a question?
Yeah.
Quick one.
It
You only
is-
have 5 minutes.
Hopefully it can be answered quickly. My question is based on Sabine, your mentioning representation about all these books being very male dominated and not having female characters. I want to go further than that and say, well, are all of your books heteronormative? Are all of them talking only about the binary? Are there any characters? Do you hope to write a character who might be transgender or gender fluid or something else, or maybe a non-heterosexual relationship?
So can you explain that word to me? Heteronormative.
Binary.
Thanks for asking that, because I was going to ask that as well.
I mean,
मेरे को नहीं समझ आई क्या है.
By the way, this is one
What
of
does it
my
mean?
feminist fiction students.
Right. So
So,
I can
What does
explain
it
a
mean?
little.
Don't
on
try and
that.
impress the teacher. Huh?
Yeah.
We all speak normal English.
So उसमें देखो, the point is, first of all, आपने कहा कि it's our leads are men, doesn't mean they're not female characters. I think they're very strong female characters. और फिर landscape is important. हमारे landscape जिस तरह शायद उमर ने बताया है, you can't really have some of those things. At the same time, there are obviously, it's the world we live in. There are transgenders and there is, bisexuality and all those things happen. So you have to read it and see where it is. मगर अब, you also have to be contextual about these things, right? I mean, I live in San Francisco. I understand completely where you're coming from, but you cannot place those things in Waziristan because it can't operate. It will be science fiction then.
But I want to tell you. I want to tell you something.
What I mean is,
No, in the sense that we actually have very strong women in our culture. These are women who wield so much power. I mean, a man might be a head of the family, but the woman is the neck.
Yeah, exactly.
He will turn whichever way.
But since
she
you have
wants
asked
him
that
to.
question, I must say something, and please don't copy it, anyone. I am working on a eunuch detective. Okay.
Okay,
So
thanks for telling us.
based in Mumbai on the so I have written a short story already, and which will go. It's a eunuch from the streets of Bombay, the Hijras. So who becomes a detective. Yeah.
Any more questions? There's one here, one there. So it'll have to be a quick question because we only have a few minutes left. Yeah.
Just a quick question for Omar. We're talking about the fact and fiction, and your first book is I know it's supposed to be fiction, but do you ever see that as possibly being made into a film?
The first book?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been in talks to make it a film. I think it's one of those things, as crime fiction generally lends itself to the big screen. And also I think contextually with Pakistani cinema kind of going through this renaissance or whatever you want to call it, certainly it's something that's been on the table for a while.
Please, can you have Fawad Khan in it? Yes.
वो कर नहीं पाएगा.
He looks good with a beard. Okay.
So my books are being turned into television, digital being the new kind of television, and like I said, I'm coming out with a book and a film. So in that sense, yeah. Like I happen to be the filmmaker myself, so it works easily. Yes. It, hopefully.
There's also a good
or Amazon, one of them. Yeah, Amazon nominated.
Okay, I think we can take in one last question.
As you just said that you are artist and you are not bound to any social responsibility. So क्या आप ऐसा भी समझते हैं कि कोई एथिकल बाउंड्री भी नहीं है, आप अपने किसी पर्सनल ग्रिज की वजह से, किसी पर्सनल मैटर की वजह से किसी को भी ग्रिल कर सकते हैं, किसी को भी अपनी बुक्स में या अपनी राइटिंग्स में बैश कर सकते हैं?
नहीं, हमको जर्नलिस्ट तो नहीं है, वी आर नॉट जर्नलिस्ट. देखें, आप एक बात में ये कोई आप जो बात कर रहे हैं ना कि एथिकल बाउंड्री की बात नहीं है. एथिकल इज़ वेरी डिफरेंट फ्रॉम रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी. रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी एज अ पर्सन, यू कम एंड टॉक टू समवन, आप तमीज़ से बात करते हैं, राइट? दैट्स अ पर्सनल रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी. ठीक है, जैसे यू हैव योर ओन, हमारा रिलीजन है, हमारा कल्चर है, आप किसी को गाली देकर नहीं बात करते ना, तो ये आपकी पर्सनल चीज़ है. मगर आप ये कहें कि आप किताब लिखें एंड यू हैव सम रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी, तो आप यहाँ पे पाकिस्तान ज़मीन से शुरू करें, तो यू कैन डू दैट. क्यों आप देखिए, आप अपनी फिल्में देख लें. अभी यू डोंट हैव टू, आई मीन यू यूज्ड अ वर्ड विच इज़ नॉट इवन इन माई बुक, बट देयर इज़ अ लॉट ऑफ थिंग्स दैट हैपन. आर्टिस्ट से मतलब ये है कि आप आर्टिस्ट हैं, आप एक चीज़ कह रहे हैं जो आपके अंदर कहानी है, ठीक है, वो आप कहानी निकालना चाह रहे हैं. अब वो कहानी निकलेगी, उसमें आप ये दिखाएं कि जी सारे पुलिस वाले अच्छे हैं, सारे चोर जो हैं वो ख़राब हैं, तो वो उसमें फिर मज़ा तो नहीं आएगा ना. वो 1950s तो नहीं रहा, हसीना मुइन का ड्रामा तो नहीं बनाएंगे अब. वो हम बहुत टाइम गया, अब दिस इज़ द न्यू वर्ल्ड.
Thank you for the answer, but my question was to Umar specifically.
Okay, no, that's fine.
Thank you very much.
I think first of all, as I said, that books are
First,
fiction.
I complete. I'm particularly talking about The Prisoner specifically.
We have very little time, so.
बिल्कुल कोई
And,
मसला
and उमर के पास एक मग है जिस पे लिखा है Be nice to me or I'll put you in my
नहीं,
book.
ऐसी कोई नहीं, आपने पूछा, आपका हक है, बिल्कुल आपका हक है ये पूछना. बात ये है कि फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, जैसे मैंने कहा कि दिस इज़ अ नॉवल, राइट? नॉवल में किसी भी राइटर का हक है कि वो किसी भी इशू पर को किसी भी तरीके से ले. इट इज़ नॉट अ पॉलिटिकल मैनिफेस्टो, इट इज़ नॉट हामिद कैपिटल टॉक विद हामिद मीर ईदर, ठीक है? इट्स नॉट अ न्यूज़पेपर आर्टिकल इन एन ऑप-एड पीस. हर आदमी का या हर राइटर का वो है कि ही और शी कैन फिक्शनलाइज वट एवर दे फील टू फिक्शनलाइज. आप मेरे बारे में किताब लिख लें जिसमें आप पुलिस वालों को गालियाँ दें, नो प्रॉब्लम, बिकॉज दैट्स योर विजन, राइट? आपकी विजन है. It's fiction writing has to be about things as a particular writer sees them and how he or as a filmmaker envisions, जो उनकी vision आगे आती है उसके बारे में है. तो उसमें अगर आप इस तरह की बाउंड्रीज या वो डालनी शुरू कर देंगे कि जिससे राइटर्स जो हैं वो सेल्फ सेंसर करना शुरू कर दें, तो फिर तो मेरे ख्याल से क्रिएटिव, you take the word creative out of the whole genre, right? Whether it's filmmaking or whether it's writing.
Yeah.
That's a very good answer.
और I like to add to that, हमारे इंडिया में ये बहुत हो रहा है आजकल कि काफ़ी लोग ऑफेंड हो रहे हैं चीज़ों से. ये अभी आपने सुना होगा हाल में एक संजय लीला भंसाली की फिल्म सेट पे लोग गए और थोड़ा थोड़ी हो गई. तो वहाँ पे देखिए आप समझिए कि ये कुछ भी आप करेंगे कोई ना कोई तो ऑफेंड होने वाला है ना. तो आप ये तो नहीं है ना कि मतलब राइटर बैठे और बोले यार पहले मैं ऐसा एक लिस्ट बनाता हूँ जिसमें कोई ऑफेंड ना हो. तो अगर वो लिस्ट बनाने तो कभी राइट करेंगे ही नहीं आप यार.
आजकल तो करना चाहिए
ना. सो somebody is going to get offended. Now at the thing is that the person who is getting offended should feel understand कि भैया एक फिक्शन है, एक कहानी अफसाना है, ये रियलिटी नहीं है, बेस्ड इन रियलिटी है, मगर ये फिक्शन है. जिस दिन वो अंडरस्टैंडिंग हो जाएगी, आई थिंक दिस काइंड ऑफ क्वेश्चंस विल नॉट कम इनटू एनीबॉडीज हेड्स.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Piyush. Thank you, SS. Thank you, Omar, for being here. It was a wonderful session.
Thank you very much.
It.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for attending the session. All sessions for the day have ended. Please join us in the main garden for the closing ceremony of Karachi Literature Festival at 6 p.m. Thank you.